So here we have the first strategy to deal with negative risk, and that is avoiding risk. Example of this could be, it is heavily raining and snowing outside. So there's a lot of snow, roads are slippery, visibility is bad. And now if I have to go to office under this particular environment, there is a risk of accident. So how do I deal with that particular risk? So one option could be avoiding the risk. And how could I avoid that? Probably I can take a day off, or I could work from home. So that is avoiding risk. So you know the risk and you change the plan to avoid the risk. Other option could be using a proven approach rather than experimenting with, or rather than choosing a new approach. So when you are designing something, rather than choosing the latest design, you just choose the proven one, the one which has been okay for a number of times, you have used that. So take that as an option rather than experimenting with the new one. So that way you can avoid risk of failure. Team communication is another thing. So if the team or the people or the staff in your company, if they know that there is a risk on doing something, you communicate to them, and that way you can avoid the risk, because now people are much more aware of the risk. So if people are aware of the risk, they can avoid that. So this is strategy number 1 to deal with negative risk, and that is avoiding risks. Sometimes you cannot avoid a thing. If I have to go to office, roads are slippery, it's snowing outside, and I have to go. So in that particular case, if I cannot avoid going to office, the next option would be to mitigate risk. How could I mitigate risk? By ensuring that my car has snow tires on that, so that there is a less chance of slipping. Then I use a route which is better, there is no rush, there is no congestion in that. So probably I can choose a different route for the office. It might be a little longer, but still I will prefer to go that rather than going on a high speed highway where there is a more chance of slipping. So that's another way to mitigate that. So in mitigation, you reduce the probability and or the impact of the risk. So either the probability you reduce or you reduce the impact of that. There are few examples in industrial scenario, which could be you simplify your processes, so there is a less chance of failure, and even if there is a failure, there is a less impact of that. Few other option could be developing a prototype rather than making a big project planned and then seeing it's failing. Better to have a small model of that, small prototype of that made before going full scale on any particular project or thing. Sometimes you can add additional inspections. So if you are buying material from a supplier, then you put additional inspections to mitigate issues once the material is received by you. So that is a second strategy, which is mitigating risks. Third strategy to deal with negative risk could be transferring risk to a third party. So how do you transfer your risk to a third party? That is, for example, buying an insurance. So in case of my car slipping, having an accident on a slippery road, probably I will have an insurance which covers me. So that way, if there is any risk, that risk gets transferred to the insurance company. So transferring risk is another option. And in industrial scenario, you could have, if you are buying an equipment, you could buy maybe performance warranty on that, or if you are buying some household item, you can take additional long-term warranty on that particular product. So that way you transfer your risk. But for transferring your risk, definitely you have to pay a price for that. So you pay some additional price to transfer your risk to a third party. And the fourth option for dealing with negative risks could be accepting the risk, taking no action. If the risk is small, the probability is low, the impact is also low. So in that case, probably you will just accept the risk. Rather than taking any action, you just take the risk and you will see when things happen, you will deal with that. So there are two types of acceptance. One is passive acceptance, where you have no plan. You just said, okay, I will see when that happens. So that's a passive acceptance. Active acceptance is where you have a contingency plan. You know that there is a less chance of that risk happening. Even if that happens, there is not a big impact, but probably you will still have a contingency plan for that. You will keep some separate money for that. You will keep some additional resources to deal with that. So that way you are not acting on the risk right now. Probably you are just keeping in your mind, just keeping some reserve for that. So that is active acceptance of the risk. And passive acceptance, as we told earlier, was you accept the risk, you don't take any action, you just say that, okay, I will see when that thing happens, I will see. So that is acceptance of negative risk.